You know, when you picture a 17th century explorer, there's a very specific image that comes to mind, right?
Oh, absolutely. The classic oil painting look.
Yeah, exactly. You probably imagine a grizzled sea captain standing at the bow of a wooden ship, spyglass in hand, salt spray in his beard, staring down this uncharted horizon.
Right, because we expect our historical explorers to be driven by this, noble, singular purpose.
Right. But the reality of colonial expansion was, well, it was often much closer to a modern corporate scandal.
Oh, very much so.
Because when you actually dig into the historical records for today's deep dive, that pristine painting of the heroic explorer kind of fades away, and you are left staring at a highly educated middle manager.
Very arrogant middle manager.
Extremely. A man who somehow provokes international hostage crises, engages in outright piracy, goes to prison, and then despite causing absolute mayhem, sues his employer for his severance package and actually wins.
It is wild.
It really is. You are probably wondering how a man with a philosophy degree ends up playing pirate on the edge of the known world. So today we are bringing you into the astonishing, contradictory, and just chaotic life of Pieter Nuyts.
Yeah, Nuyts is, he really is the ultimate cautionary tale of the Dutch Golden Age.
He really is. And for this deep dive, we are drawing from a really fascinating stack of sources. We've got biographical dictionaries, historical treatises, maritime records, Australian regional mapping histories, and even Japanese ukiyo woodblock prints.
Which is quite the variety.
It is. And our mission today is to figure out how this guy managed to fail upwards so spectacularly. Okay, let's unpack this. We already know the Dutch East India Company, the VOC, functioned as a sovereign state.
Right, they were a massive mega corporation.
Yeah, they had armies, they minted coins, they shaped global geography. But what does it actually take to climb the corporate ladder inside a 17th century mega corporation?
Well, it takes exactly what it takes in a lot of modern institutions. You need the right zip code, the right degree, and the right network.
Right. It's all about who you know.
Exactly. So Pieter Nuyts was born in 1598 in Middelburg. And Middelburg was a massive administrative hub for the VOC.
Okay.
His parents were wealthy Protestant emigres from Antwerp. So from the absolute moment he was born, he was embedded in this elite merchant class bubble.
So he's already at the top of the social food chain.
Yeah. But instead of sending him straight to the docks to, learn the spice trade, his family sent him to the prestigious University of Leiden.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, to study philosophy, of all things.
And he didn't just, casually attend classes, right? He fully bought into that intellectual identity.
Oh, completely. He steeped himself in Roman law, and Seneca, and Cicero.
There is this great detail from the sources I wanted to bring up. In 1613, while he was at Leiden, he actually managed to meet the Moroccan envoy to the Low Countries, El-Hajjari.
Yes.
And Nuyts had the envoy write a personal entry in his album Amicorum, which is essentially like a 17th century networking autograph book for the European elite.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
He was very carefully curating this image of himself as a cosmopolitan humanist.
Right, and that curation was highly intentional. You have to remember, in the Dutch Republic back then, classical education equated to moral and executive authority.
Oh, really?
Yeah. By aligning himself with Stoicism and humanism, Nuyts was signaling to the power brokers in Amsterdam that he had the rational discipline required to govern.
Okay, that makes sense.
So when he finally decides he wants more than just his father's local business and joins the VOC in 1626, he isn't starting at the bottom.
Right.
He is immediately seen as a rising star and given a major executive posting.
Which leads us to May of 1626. He boards a ship called the Gulden Zeepaert, or the Golden Seahorse.
Which is a great name for a ship.
It is, but instead of taking the standard route straight to the Dutch headquarters in Batavia, the ship sails east.
Yep, completely off the beaten path.
Right, and they end up charting 1,800 kilometers of the entirely unknown southern coast of Australia.
And from a cartographic perspective, it was a monumental achievement.
Absolutely.
They mapped the Great Australian Bight from what is now Albany in Western Australia all the way across to Ceduna in South Australia.
Wow.
Yeah, and this expedition provided immense scientific value. By charting that massive continuous coastline, they basically helped prove that New Holland wasn't physically attached to Antarctica.
Which was the prevailing theory at the time, right?
Exactly. People thought there was just one giant southern landmass.
And because Nuyts is the highest-ranking VOC official on board, he gets the naming rights. So the captain, François Thijssen, names this massive new territory Nillen van Pieter Nuyts,
which literally translates to Nuyts land.
Right. But, okay, I have to stop here and challenge the logic of this entire command structure.
Of course.
Because the VOC boardroom, thousands of miles away, put a philosopher in charge of a literal leap into the dark over the actual mariner sailing the ship.
It sounds absurd to us today.
It's totally absurd. And furthermore, he brought his 4-year-old son, Lawrence, on this voyage.
Yeah, he did.
I mean, I get trusting an executive to manage a ledger, but putting a guy with zero maritime background in command of an expedition to the edge of the world with a toddler in tow? Why would they do that?
Well, what's fascinating here is how clearly this illustrates the internal logic of the VOC. You have to picture the mindset of the directors in Amsterdam.
Okay.
They're trying to manage a global fleet from a boardroom in Europe. They can't, monitor their captains out on the Indian Ocean.
So they need someone they trust.
Right. And what metric do they use for trust? Academic pedigree. The captain sailed the ship, sure, but Nuyts commanded the mission because his Leiden education supposedly equipped him with the intellectual superiority to represent the company.
Even if he didn't know the bow from the stern.
Exactly. And as for bringing his 4-year-old son, it wasn't a calculated risk to Nuyts. In his mind, this wasn't a dangerous exploration.
What was it then?
It was a grand elite relocation to his new colonial domain. It was pure hubris. He viewed himself as a Roman governor, setting out to claim his province.
Oh, wow. Well, that hubris pays off at first, right? Because he arrives in Batavia in April 1627, and because they just mapped a continent, he's treated like a returning conqueror.
Oh, I loved him.
The VOC directors are so blinded by this mapping success that they immediately hand him a staggering double promotion.
Just massive.
They make him the governor of Formosa, which is modern-day Taiwan, and the official ambassador to Japan.
I mean, it was just an incredibly reckless administrative decision.
Really? Why?
Because they handed a man with no practical diplomatic experience the 2 most volatile geopolitical portfolios in their entire empire.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. The VOC desperately needed Formosa to access Chinese silk, and they urgently needed to repair trade relations with the Tokugawa shogunate in Japan to get silver and copper.
So Nuyts takes his new title, grabs his son, and sails straight to Japan to meet the shogun Tokugawa Iemitsu.
Right.
But he is walking blindly into a trap. At the exact same time, there is a Japanese trader named Hamada Yahei.
Yeah, this guy's brilliant.
He really is. Yahei brings a group of native Formosans to the Japanese court. He dresses them up, passes them off as the legitimate rulers of Formosa, and offers to cede sovereignty of the island directly to the shogun.
Which is a direct threat to the Dutch.
Exactly. Yahei is playing this brilliant countermove, positioning himself against the VOC. So Nuyts walks in expecting a standard corporate negotiation, and he is completely ambushed.
And he responds to that ambush
It's
terribly.
early.
The Tokugawa court was a highly complex, ritualized political environment. Protocol, deference, cultural subtlety, these were absolute requirements.
But the records show his mission was a complete, humiliating failure.
Total failure.
He's flat out refused an audience with the shogun, and the Japanese officials specifically cited his haughty demeanor and the inappropriate antics of his crew as the reason.
Right.
But surely a highly educated diplomat should have known how to read the room. I struggle to understand how a man specifically trained in diplomacy fails so spectacularly. Did he just, forget his manners?
Well, it wasn't about forgetting manners. It was really about 2 entirely incompatible worldviews colliding.
Okay, how so?
Nuyts' Leiden education armed him with a stoic framework of European superiority. He genuinely believed in the inherent rationality and supremacy of the Dutch humanist tradition.
So he thought he was just better than them.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
He walked into the Tokugawa court assuming that his status as an executive of a global megacorporation demanded immediate deference. But the shogunate demanded cultural subordination. When Nuyts wasn't treated as the smartest, most powerful man in the room, his haughtiness was basically a defensive mechanism.
He just doubled down.
Exactly. He lacked the cultural agility to bend to Japanese protocol because doing so would have violated his rigid sense of intellectual superiority.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because Nuyts leaves Japan with his pride entirely shattered.
Oh, he's fuming.
Yeah, he has totally burned his bridges with the shogun, so he retreats to his fallback position as governor of Formosa, operating out of Fort Zeelandia. And this is where his strategy pivots from, haughty diplomacy to outright aggression. He basically becomes a pirate.
Yeah, his mandate in Formosa was clear. Force Ming Dynasty China to open up trade with the VOC.
And diplomacy had just failed him.
Right. Since his reliance on intellect had just failed him so miserably in Japan, he concluded that coercion was the only pragmatic lever left to pull.
And he pulls it hard. He decides to kidnap a man named Zheng Zilong.
Which is a huge deal.
Huge. Zheng was a massively powerful Chinese merchant, pirate, and military leader. Nuyts takes him hostage to force the Chinese into granting trading privileges.
And this decision creates generational bad blood.
Yeah, because 30 years later, Zheng's son, Koxinga, would use this deep-seated grievance as fuel to militarily expel the Dutch from Formosa entirely.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, by prioritizing a short-term demonstration of dominance over long-term strategic relationship building, Nuyts severely damaged the VOC's viability in the whole region.
Meanwhile, his personal life in Formosa is just deteriorating into a scandalous, chaotic mess.
Oh, it's a disaster.
Right. After his Dutch wife passes away, Nuyts begins taking up with native women. The historical records are just full of rumors about his private indiscretions.
But there is one detail that really stands out.
Oh, the interpreter. Yes, it's reported he kept a local interpreter hidden underneath his bed.
Under his bed.
Literally under his bed, so the guy could translate his amorous pillow talk with these women.
I mean, it highlights the surreal isolation of these colonial administrators, doesn't it?
It really does.
They were attempting to assert complete dominance over regions they fundamentally did not understand. So they had to rely on hidden intermediaries for their most intimate interactions.
It paints a ridiculous picture. But if we look at his underlying ideology, I have to say it's baffling.
How do you mean?
Well, for a guy whose entire identity is wrapped up in being a rational philosopher, quoting Cicero and Seneca, kidnapping a rival pirate boss and ruling through brute force feels like a complete betrayal of his own supposed morals.
You'd think so, right?
Was his philosophy just a performance for his peers back in Leiden?
Well, actually, Nuyts isn't betraying his ideology at all. He is perfectly executing the paradox of the Dutch Golden Age.
Okay, unpack that for me.
The Dutch Republic championed liberty, reason, and moral enlightenment at home, right?
Right.
But their economic supremacy relied on the VOC, which operated as an engine of aggressive, coercive extraction abroad.
So there's a double standard.
Exactly. To a man like Nuyts, classical philosophy provided a framework for governance, not a mandate for universal human rights.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, when dealing with what he considered lesser nations, violence wasn't a failure of diplomacy. It was authorized statecraft. Plunder and hostage-taking were simply alternative corporate strategies when negotiations stalled.
Wow. Well, those corporate strategies catch up to him pretty quickly.
They sure do.
His aggressive hostage-taking in Formosa enrages the Japanese even further, largely because of his ongoing conflict with Hamada Yahya. Trade between the VOC and Japan completely freezes.
And that's bad for business.
Very bad. The VOC directors back in Batavia look at their rapidly declining balance sheets, look at their arrogant philosopher governor, and realize he is a huge liability.
A massive one.
So to save their silver and copper trade, the VOC hands Pieter Nuyts over to the Japanese as a literal scapegoat.
It is a profound demonstration of how little individual pedigree matters when weighed against corporate profit.
Seriously.
The VOC surrendered its own high-ranking governor, an appointed representative of the Dutch Republic, to a foreign power just to unblock a supply chain.
So from 1632 to 1636, Nuyts is kept under house arrest in Japan.
Yep.
And this is where his earlier hubris exacts a devastating toll. His son, Lawrence, the toddler he brought on that grand voyage to Australia, dies while they were in Japanese captivity.
It's awful. It is a tragedy entirely engineered by Nuyts' own administrative arrogance.
Yeah.
A boy who spent his entire short life on colonial ships and in forts, dead as a political prisoner.
And how does Nuyts cope with this immense grief and imprisonment? He turns back to the very classical education that got him there in the first place.
Right, he starts writing again.
He writes these Latin treatises.
Right.
And one of them is titled Loftus Elephants, or In Praise of the Elephant.
It's a fascinating text.
It is. In this essay, he argues that the elephant is a highly rational being that physically weeps for its lost homeland when it's captured and chained.
Which is a blatant metaphor for his own imprisonment.
Clearly. He is meditating deeply on captivity, slavery, and the stripping away of rational freedom.
He's projecting his own misery onto the animal, right?
Right.
Framing himself as this noble, majestic creature unjustly bound by men who lack his intellect.
But wait, I have to push back on this.
Okay.
You're telling me he sits in house arrest, weeping over the lost freedom of an elephant, but feels absolutely zero cognitive dissonance about his company running the global slave trade?
It's wild to think about.
Because the VOC actively built its empire by capturing, trading, and exploiting enslaved people across the transatlantic and Indian Ocean networks. Was he really that blind?
This raises an important question about the architecture of colonial thinking. It wasn't blindness, It was profound compartmentalization. Nuyts could afford to philosophize about the existential horrors of captivity only when it applied to a recognized intellectual equal.
Which in this case was himself.
Exactly. The system he served and the violence it inflicted on tens of thousands of human beings was just categorized as mere commerce.
That's chilling.
The tragedy of Pieter Nuyts isn't that he abandoned his philosophy, it's that his philosophy was specifically designed to exclude the people he was exploiting.
He only recognized the chains when they were around his own wrists.
Yep.
Ultimately, his release isn't secured by his poignant essays about elephants, though.
Not at all.
It is orchestrated by another Dutch official named François Thijssen. Now, Thijssen actually understood Japanese culture and protocol.
He was much more adaptable.
Right. And he successfully bribes the shogun to secure Nuyts' release in 1636.
And do you remember what he used for the bribe?
Yes. He does it by gifting the shogun a massive, extraordinarily heavy brass chandelier.
A chandelier.
It feels like an incredibly pointed gesture. It's like sending an absurdly expensive fruit basket to get out of a prison sentence. It's this massive physical display of weight and material wealth to counter all of Nuyts' hot air.
Karen understood what Nuyts never could, which is that diplomacy in the Tokugawa court required tangible demonstrations of respect and tribute, not just intellectual posturing.
So Nuyts is finally released and returns to the Netherlands in 1637. Now, logic dictates that returning home as a disgraced, bankrupt former hostage who tanked international trade would be the end of his public life.
In a strict meritocracy, yes, definitely.
Right.
But the Dutch elite operated with an incredibly robust social safety net for their own class.
The way he fails upward is just staggering. It's like a CEO bankrupting a company, going to jail, and then successfully suing the board of directors for his severance package.
That's literally what happens.
The VOC dishonorably discharges him and levies massive fines against him for the financial damages he caused. But Nuyts taps into his powerful family connections in Zealand. He sues the VOC to get his money back. His legal argument is essentially, I was acting as your official executive representative. You authorize my authority. Therefore, you assume the risk of my actions.
And amazingly, he actually wins.
He wins.
He leverages the decentralized structure of the VOC. By utilizing his local network within the Middelburg chamber of the company, he forces them to indemnify him against his own disastrous incompetence.
Completely rehabilitating his fortune in the process.
Exactly.
He gets his wealth back, and he immediately pivots into politics. He becomes the mayor of Hulster-Ambacht 3 times, and the mayor of the city of Hulst twice.
Talk about bouncing back.
I know. He lives a comfortable, prestigious life until he dies in 1655.
And the audits conducted after his death offer the perfect postscript to his administrative career.
Oh, the embezzlement.
Yes, local auditors discovered that during his time as mayor, he had been actively embezzling taxes.
Unbelievable.
His surviving son, Peter the Younger, had to liquidate assets just to pay off the debts to save the family name.
So up until his dying day, he was utilizing his elite position to extract wealth from the system.
He never changed.
Yet despite the embezzlement, the piracy, and the diplomatic disasters, his name remains immortalized.
It really does.
Because of the sheer accuracy of that 1627 map from his first voyage, the famous British navigator Matthew Flinders kept Nuyts' name on the map.
Right. If you look at Australia today, you'll find Nuyts Reef and Cape Nuyts.
There's even a vibrant parasitic tree known as the Western Australian Christmas tree, whose scientific name is Nuytsia floribunda.
His geographical legacy even permeated classical literature, too.
Wait, really? How?
Well, Jonathan Swift allegedly used the highly detailed maps of the St. Peter and St. Francis Islands, the very islands Nuyts and Thijssen charted in the Great Australian Bight, as the geographic blueprints for the fictional lands of Lilliput and Bluskew in Gulliver's Travels.
Wow, I had no idea about that. So what does this all mean? It requires us to hold 2 deeply contradictory realities about his legacy at the exact same time.
It does.
In the West, his name is synonymous with the expansion of human knowledge immortalized in cartography, botany, and literature. He is the brave explorer.
But if we look at how he is remembered in the East, a very, very different picture emerges.
Right, and that brings us to a final, lingering detail from the archives that really forces us to reevaluate how history is recorded.
Yeah, we have to talk about the Japanese woodblock prints.
Yes. In the 1800s, so this is more than 2 centuries after Nuyts left Japan, a Japanese artist named Sato Masaki created a vivid ukiyo-e woodblock print.
And it wasn't just a generic depiction of a foreigner, right?
No, not at all. The print is specifically titled Storytelling about the Hamada Yahoo Incident. It is a highly detailed, visceral depiction of Pieter Nuyts' capture and humiliation.
Think about the gravity of that.
Yeah.
An obscure Dutch middle manager made such a profoundly negative, lasting impression that Japanese artists were still illustrating his downfall hundreds of years later.
And those illustrations found a modern audience, too.
They did.
Yeah, in the 20th century, Taiwanese school textbooks used the story of Pieter Nuyts as their prime historical example to define the typical, arrogant Western bully.
Wow. It really challenges you to consider how history eventually flattens a complex human life into a permanent cultural archetype.
It really does.
Pieter Nuyts viewed himself as a cosmopolitan intellectual, deeply rational philosopher who wept over the metaphor of a captive elephant longing for its homeland.
Right.
But the world he disrupted stripped him of all that nuance. He shows us that intellectual brilliance can never compensate for a total lack of cultural empathy.
Such a good point.
To an entire hemisphere, the man who wanted to be remembered as a stoic Roman governor became the eternal, two-dimensional face of Western arrogance.
It is a brilliant reminder for anyone navigating a massive institution today. You might view yourself as the heroic visionary charting the future, entirely secure in your pedigree and your pristine logic. But if you refuse to understand the culture you operate in, history won't remember your philosophy. It'll just remember the guy who hid his translator under the bed while his empire burned.
Perfectly said.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. Catch you next time.